Alright, time to go over the last few foils for Booster Set 3 for OverDress, and the newly announced restriction rulings. For OverDress anyway, so let's begin. So first off, let's start off with Dragon Empire with a Eugene card, Howitzer of the Dust Storm Dustin. It's a triple rare grade 2 with 10 power and skillless. Auto, when placed on rearguard, if your Vanguard is Eugene, put the card from your hand to soul, draw a card, choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or greater rearguards and retire it. Overall, not too bad. It lets you filter out your soul and it lets you draw another card on top of it, plus a retire, which is basically another plus for Eugene. So not bad. But its second skill, Auto Rearguard. When this card attacks, costs Soul Blast 1, this unit gets plus 2k power for each of your opponent's open rearguards. This is an okay skill, although one Soul Blast is a little restrictive, considering that Eugene will need the soul and every soul kind of counts for Eugene, so you will mainly use this when your opponent's field is almost empty. But overall, nice new addition for Eugene. To continue off to the card of the days from yesterday, which are also Dragon Empire, we start out with a double rare Drag Ritter Shihab, grade 1, 6k power and skills. Auto, when placed on rearguard, this card gets us 5k power until the end of turn. 11k beater for early game, it's fine, especially because you do want to use this early game because of its second skill, Count Rearguard. When you would ride from your ride deck, you may put this to soul instead of discarding the card from your hand. So basically, this is made for an early game card. It's supposed to be an early game beater, and then combining that with the second skill where when you're going to be riding from your ride deck, basically everything before grade 3, instead of discarding a card, you get a resource instead, which is easily doable with Overlord because Overlord's ride line lets you search for a specific card, which could be this card and then giving you that soul instead, and Overlord does use a little bit of soul, so this could be a nice tech option. Although for my personal preferences, I would still rather run the Ninja because the Ninja could be just put to soul as long as you discard it in any way, so it could be even after when you finish riding to grade 3, but it all depends on the deck. And then for the next two cards, which are definitely made for Overlord, we got Steel Bullet of the Dust Storm Ethan and Bombarding Dragon Brachio Force. Ethan is a rare grade 2 with 9k power, and Brachio Force is a grade 2 with 10k power, and both have a very similar skill. Both of them are Auto Rearguard. When your Vanguard's attack hit, cost retire this unit, draw a card. Ethan lets you countercharge 1, and Brachio Force lets you retire one of your opponent's rearguards. It is definitely made for Overlord because Overlord can guarantee an attack on rearguard as long as your opponent doesn't play Blitz orders. And Ethan is definitely better than Gojo because unlike Gojo, Ethan lets you draw a card with the countercharge. Now you need the booster, then well, Gojo might be better, but overall these two are very nice for Overlord since Overlord is essentially guaranteed to attack hit. And now to Cater's Sanctuary, our first card is a triple rare Knight of Heavenly Impulse Lagure, grade 3, 30 power and skillless. Auto Rearguard. When this card attacks a Vanguard, cost Count Blast 2, rest any number of other rearguards, and then until the end of the battle this card gets drive checks, and plus additional 5k power. And at the end of the battle, if 3 or less rearguards were rested for this cost, choose 3 cards from hand and discard them. If 1 or less was rested, you choose an additional 2 cards. So basically, if you only rested 1 or less rearguards, you have to discard 5 cards. So to prevent yourself from a discard, you must rest 4 rearguards just to give this card twin drive. I mean, this can be a nice tech option, and luckily there's no grade 3 restriction on it, so depending on the deck, you can probably use this card. Now personally, I don't know how exactly to feel about this card, mainly because of the discard and the resting, but I do see some potential in it. If there's a Cater Sanctuary deck that requires you to drive check more stuff to activate skills, like Sorceress drive checking triggers, and the deck doesn't really heavily rely on counterblasts, well, this card can be decent, especially if there's a lot of restand involved. Next for a double rare, East Rod Angel, grade 3, during power and skills. Auto, when placed on rearguard, costs Soul Blast 1, look at the top card of your deck. If it's a unit call it to rearguard, the same column as this unit. If you did not call, return it back to the top. Honestly, this is actually pretty good. It's a grade 3, which of course will support Bastion by default, but it's also generic, which you could play in any Cater Sanctuary deck. And I like this card more than Maka, because unlike Maka, this one doesn't need to retire. Although Maka does have the choice of choice filtering, so it's player preferences, but I definitely will run this in Phantom Blaster Dragon. And there's also the Sorceress deck manipulation where you could just put a regular unit on the top and then you could just call it. So it is overall pretty nice. And now for final rush support for Dark States, Our first card is a triple rare Diablo's Returner Derek. Grade 2, tank power and skills. Count rearguard if you're in Final Rush plus 5k, like most Final Rush cards. Second skill, act rearguard once per turn, cost count last one, put a rearguard to your soul, choose one of your opponent's rearguards for every 4 cards in your soul and retire it. Then if you're in Final Rush, look at the same number of cards on the top of your deck equal to open rearguards from your opponent, and then choose any number of them and call them to rearguard. So Final Rush gets a Eugene type card. Yep, another strong card for Bruce. Now how I feel about the situation? Honestly, it's not the first time where Bushy introduces a deck which is like very powerful until like later sets where they make another archetype to destroy this one. And also OverDress is for newer players, so it has to be a little more simple, just like when V first started. And finally, a rare Diablo Striker Brian. Grade 3, turn power and skills. Act rearguard once per turn, cost Soul Blast 2. Until the end turn, your whole front row gets us 5k power, and if you are in Final Rush, your Vanguard gets a crit. This is not bad because mass power for your front row is very helpful for Bruce, and also that crit can also make things a little more threatening. Now the Soul Blast 2 can be a little hefty because you want to save it all for Bruce, but considering that you have a lot of soul charging in dark states, you might be able to do this. Now it is a grade 3, so you might not actually run this, but it is considerable. And finally, the new ruling, which will take place at September 24th, 2021. For OverDress Standard, you cannot run more than 8 copies of a trigger type. Now personally, this doesn't really change much for most decks, as many decks run a 7 or 8 crit with the 4 heals, and then depending on the deck, they will definitely run the over trigger along with 3 copies of a draw or a front. Now I can see the scenario where 12 crits is going to be majority of decks, and that's mainly because most decks are right now running the 20k fronts over the draw, but I usually see the trigger lineup is depending on the deck, because running more crits can actually hinder your deck a little bit. Yes, you could try to kill the game faster, but you're also going to be having a harder time getting your key pieces, and in some cases lack of power. But I do agree with people that the trigger shield values should stay the same as it was from V. That's just my thoughts overall. And then the next rule changes for premium will be announced next week. So that's it for this stream, or what card of the days. Not much, and honestly, some of the rule changes, like, I don't really mind, because one, I do not like to play 12 crit decks in the first place. I always like to have some other triggers than 12 crits. And two, the thing about power creep like Bruce, well, every game kinda has that, especially when the person who goes first has the setup advantage. And overall, OverDress should just stay simple for a while, as it's for newer players, just like how V was first introduced. But never mind those thoughts, what do you guys think about these cards? I mean, some of them are nice, Bruce is definitely still powerful, there's not much to say, but other than that, see you all next time.